I should have known. Looking back now, all the signs were there, little moments, offhand comments, subtle shifts in behavior that, had I been paying attention, would have told me exactly where I stood in my own family. But I wasn't paying attention. I was too busy being the provider, the dependable one, the fool who thought love and sacrifice were enough to keep a family together. I was wrong. Let me introduce myself. My name is Malcolm. I'm 58 years old, and for the better part of my life, I did what a good husband and father was supposed to do. I worked hard. I built a life for my family. I provided, protected, and made sure they had more than I ever did growing up. I wasn't born into wealth. No silver spoon, no inheritance waiting for me at the end of some trust fund. I worked for everything. I started at a small accounting firm, climbing my way up the corporate ladder while Deborah, my wife, stayed home to raise our daughter Sophia. It was a role we both agreed on. She wanted to be there for Sophia full-time, and I wanted to make sure they never had to worry about money. So I worked hard. Late nights at the office, missed weekends, skipped vacations, all of it to make sure my family had the best. I bought us a comfortable house in Rosewood Heights, a quiet suburban neighborhood where kids rode their bikes down the street and families gathered for Sunday barbecues. I made sure Sophia went to the best private schools, paid for every extracurricular activity she wanted, and when the time came, I wrote the check for her entire college tuition. Debt-free. No loans. Just a father taking care of his daughter. And I never once asked for a thank you. You see, I never needed gratitude. That wasn't why I did it. I did it because they were my family. My wife, my daughter, they were my world. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. Maybe it was subtle at first, small moments I brushed off because, surely, my own wife and daughter wouldn't take me for granted. Like the way Deborah started making financial decisions without me. Small at first. An expensive piece of furniture here, a last-minute vacation there. Whenever I questioned it, she'd wave me off, saying, "You can afford it, Malcolm. Why are you making a big deal?" Or the way Sophia's gratitude became expectation. She never hesitated to ask for money, new clothes, trips with friends, an apartment in the city, but the words, "Thank you, Dad," became rare, almost non-existent. Then there was the wedding. When Sophia got engaged to Tyler, a corporate attorney from a well-off family, I was thrilled for her. I offered to pay for the wedding, despite Tyler's parents insisting they could handle half. "No," I had said, smiling at my daughter. "This is my gift to you. I want you to have the wedding of your dreams." I should have seen it then. The shift in Sophia's expression, the way her eyes flickered toward her mother as if silently confirming something between them. I should have paid attention when Deborah started making all the decisions without asking for my input. The venue, the guest list, the catering, all handled by them, while I signed the checks like some faceless sponsor. I should have noticed the way they never talked about the wedding when I was around. But I didn't. Because why would I? Why would I ever think that my own wife and daughter would exclude me from the very wedding I paid for? I ignored the signs. I told myself it was just pre-wedding stress, that they'd include me when it mattered. I was wrong. A day before what I thought was the wedding, I walked into the kitchen, smiled at Deborah, and said, "I can't wait for the wedding tomorrow." And that's when she laughed. Not a nervous chuckle. Not a guilty giggle. A full-blown, amused chuckle as if I had just told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. "What?" she said, still smiling. "The wedding happened yesterday." That moment, that exact moment, split my life into two parts. Before that moment, I was Malcolm, the devoted husband and father, the provider, the man who did everything for his family. After that moment, I became something else. Because standing there in my own kitchen, staring at my wife's smug expression, I felt something inside me snap. Not in rage, not in heartbreak, but in cold, quiet realization. They had never planned to invite me. This wasn't some scheduling mistake. They had deliberately left me out. I turned to Sophia, waiting for her to correct her mother. She didn't. Instead, she hesitated, then picked up her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it up for me to see. There they were. All of them. Deborah, Sophia, Tyler, the in-laws, my siblings, my nieces and nephews. Smiling, laughing, celebrating, at a wedding I paid for. Without me. My heart pounded in my chest, but my face remained calm. I looked at my wife, the woman I had spent more than 30 years of my life with, the woman I had built a home for, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally. She shrugged. A casual, dismissive shrug, like I was some distant acquaintance they had forgotten to call. Guess I forgot to tell you, huh? She said it like it was nothing. Like I meant nothing. That was the moment I knew. They didn't just take me for granted. They didn't just see me as the wallet, the provider, the necessary burden in their perfect little lives. They saw me as irrelevant. I set my coffee mug down on the counter. Carefully. Without a word. Without a reaction. Deborah raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to explode, to yell, to demand an explanation. Sophia shifted uncomfortably, sensing that I wasn't reacting the way she expected. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I turned around, walked to the hallway, grabbed my coat from the rack, and stepped outside into the cold air. No yelling. No questioning. No begging to be included. Because in that moment, I realized something they had failed to consider. I had spent my whole life taking care of them. But they had never once considered what would happen if I decided to stop. I pulled out my phone, scrolled through my messages. No missed calls. No texts. I wasn't an afterthought. I wasn't a thought at all. I took a deep breath, exhaled slowly, and whispered to myself, let's see how much they laugh when I walk away for good. Because that's exactly what I was about to do. And they were about to regret every second of it. I stood outside my own house, the cold air biting at my skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill that had settled deep inside me. I should have been angry, furious, heartbroken, but I felt none of those things. Instead, I felt empty. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I had spent my entire life believing in an illusion of love, family, loyalty. I had built my world around them, sacrificed for them, trusted them, only to find out I was never truly part of theirs. They hadn't forgotten me. They had excluded me on purpose. That fact settled in my bones like an unbearable weight, heavier than any exhaustion I had ever felt before. I stared at my phone, my fingers numb from both the cold and the silent rage curling in my gut. No missed calls. No texts. No last-minute explanations. Nothing. Not even a fake attempt to cover up what they had done. I exhaled slowly, watching my breath cloud in the winter air, and did something I never thought I'd do. I opened my banking app. For the first time in decades, I looked at my finances not as a provider, not as a husband or father, but as a man who had been used. A man who had been nothing more than an ATM to his own family. There it was, every mortgage payment, every credit card bill, every check sent to Sophia, every monthly deposit into Deborah's personal account. All done by me. For them. And they had the audacity to throw a wedding without me? I inhaled sharply, my fingers tightening around my phone as I scrolled through my transactions. The wedding payments. Every single venue deposit, catering expense, floral arrangement, dress fitting, and luxury honeymoon package had been covered by me. And yet, they had looked me in the eye, laughed in my face, and acted like I was irrelevant. I had funded an event I wasn't even considered worthy enough to attend. My mind was running, piecing everything together, and with each realization, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just a moment of forgetfulness. This wasn't accidental. This was calculated. I turned around and walked back toward the house, my steps slow, deliberate. I wasn't sure what I expected to find when I walked back inside. Maybe a sliver of remorse. Maybe even a half-hearted attempt at an apology. But when I stepped through the front door, all I heard was laughter. Deborah's light, careless chuckle. Sophia's amused giggle. I stopped just before entering the dining room, listening. Dad's going to be fine, Sophia was saying, her voice casual, unconcerned. He always gets over things. Exactly, Deborah agreed. You know how he is. He sulks for a while, then he moves on. I told you, honey, he wouldn't have fit in at the wedding anyway. It was elegant. You know how stiff he can be. My blood turned to ice. Elegant? Stiff? I took a slow, measured breath and stepped into the room. The second they saw me, the conversation stopped. Sophia stiffened, her lips pressing together. Deborah looked up at me, her face smooth, unreadable. They weren't guilty. They were waiting. Waiting for me to act the way they expected, angry at first, but eventually forgiving. Because that's what I had always done. I let things go. I kept the peace. I swallowed my hurt because I thought that's what family was supposed to do. Not this time. So, I said, keeping my voice steady. You threw a wedding without me. Sophia sighed, already tired of the conversation she had barely participated in. Dad, please don't make this dramatic. I arched an eyebrow. Dramatic? I wasn't even invited to my own daughter's wedding. It wasn't like that, Deborah cut in smoothly. We just figured. No. I interrupted, my voice dangerously calm. You didn't forget. You decided I didn't belong. No one spoke. I looked at Sophia. Do you have any idea what you've done? I asked. She shrugged. Dad, you're acting like we abandoned you. It was just a wedding. I'm still your daughter. You're still my father. Nothing changes. Nothing changes. I let those words sink in. The sheer audacity of them. They had excluded me, mocked me behind my back, used me, and still expected me to continue providing for them as if nothing had happened. I was done. Completely, entirely done. Right? I said softly, stepping back from the table. Nothing changes. They didn't notice the shift in my tone. They didn't realize I had just made the biggest decision of my life. Deborah took a sip of her wine. Malcolm, don't be childish. You're making a big deal out of nothing. A big deal out of nothing, I repeated. Sophia rolled her eyes. Dad, come on. We had limited seats, and Mom thought. Mom thought. I repeated. So you had no say in your own wedding guest list. Sophia hesitated. And that's when I saw it. She hadn't cared enough to argue. She hadn't cared enough to fight for me. I nodded slowly, stepping back toward the hallway. Got it. Deborah raised an eyebrow. Where are you going? I need some air, I said simply. I grabbed my coat again, walked outside, and did what I should have done years ago. I opened my banking app again, and one by one, I started shutting it all down. The mortgage payments? Stopped. The credit cards in Deborah's name? Canceled. The monthly deposits into Sophia's account? Gone. The inheritance fund I had set up for her? Revoked. They didn't need me at the wedding. Let's see how well they did without my money, either. I stood on the porch, taking in the quiet night, feeling lighter than I had in years. They thought I was predictable. They thought I would always bend, always forgive, always stay. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated just how much I could take. And they were about to find out what it felt like when the man they used stopped playing the fool. Because as far as I was concerned, I was done being their ATM. And I had no plans of looking back. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, staring at the house I had spent the last 30 years building. The house that had seen birthdays, anniversaries, first steps, and late-night family dinners. A home. Or at least, that's what I had thought it was. But homes are built on love, on mutual respect, on the belief that you belong. And I didn't belong here anymore. Not to them. To them, I was a bank account with legs, a walking convenience. The one they turned to when bills needed paying, when debts needed clearing, when dreams needed funding. But when it came to including me in their lives, I was disposable. And the worst part? I had let it happen. For years, I had excused it, ignored it, rationalized it. I had told myself, that's just how families are. I had let myself believe that as long as I kept giving, kept sacrificing, they would see my worth. But they had seen my worth. They just never valued it. A cold, sharp realization settled in my chest as I sat in the driveway, the glow of the house's windows illuminating the stark truth. This wasn't a mistake. They weren't sorry, and they weren't going to change. So why the hell should I stay? I reached for my phone, opening the contact list. My lawyer's number was near the top. I stared at it. I could start right now. Call him. Tell him to start the paperwork. Divorce. Financial restructuring. Asset liquidation. Everything I had built for them. The house, the credit cards, the safety net. It all existed because of me. And if I walked away? If I truly, completely walked away? They had nothing. I let out a slow breath, pressing my thumb against my phone screen. But I didn't call. Not yet. Because I wasn't done. Not yet. I pushed the door open, stepping back into the freezing night air. My breath fogged in front of me as I walked back to the house, my footsteps deliberate, my heartbeat steady. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. When I walked inside, Deborah was still at the dining table, sipping her wine like nothing had happened. Sophia had moved to the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face as blank as ever. I stood in the entryway, watching them. They didn't even flinch. Didn't look guilty. Didn't even try to explain themselves. Because why would they? They thought they had already won. That I would get over it, like I always did. That I would sulk for a few days, then go back to paying for their lives like nothing had happened. I let the silence stretch. Then, finally, Deborah sighed, setting her glass down with a soft clink. Are you done being dramatic? I smiled. Not because I was amused. Not because I found any of this remotely funny. but because I knew something she didn't. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being done. Oh, I'm done, all right. Her eyebrows knitted together, the first flicker of something that almost looked like unease crossing her face. Look, Malcolm, she said, exasperation in her voice. I know you're upset, but it was just a wedding. You're acting like we burned the house down. I tilted my head slightly. That's an interesting way to put it, Deborah, because in a way you did. She scoffed. Oh, come on. I turned my gaze to Sophia. And you? I asked. Nothing to say? Sophia barely looked up from her phone. Dad, you're taking this way too seriously. We didn't mean to hurt you. Mom thought. Mom thought, I repeated. Sophia hesitated, then shrugged. Look, I just went along with it. It wasn't personal. Not personal. My own daughter had chosen to go along with excluding me from her wedding, had smiled for the cameras, danced under the lights, toasted to her new life, all while knowing I was sitting at home, thinking I still had a place in her world. And it wasn't personal? I felt something deep inside me go quiet. Numb. All right, I said simply. Deborah frowned. All right. That's it. That's it. I turned, walked down the hall, and into our bedroom. I didn't slam the door, didn't rip things off the walls, didn't throw things into a suitcase. Because this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment reaction. This was deliberate, planned, final. I pulled open the closet, grabbed a duffel bag, and started packing. Shirts, pants, the essentials. I didn't need much, because I wasn't planning on coming back. Behind me, I heard Deborah's voice float in from the hallway. Oh, stop it, Malcolm. You're not leaving. Where would you even go? I zipped up the bag, swung it over my shoulder, and stepped into the doorway. I don't know, I said honestly. But wherever it is, it'll be better than here. For the first time that night, I saw it. The first real flicker of fear in her eyes. Because she hadn't expected this. She had expected resistance. Expected anger. Expected me to throw a fit, but eventually stay. She hadn't expected me to walk away. I brushed past her, feeling the weight lift off my chest with every step I took toward the front door. Malcolm, she called, sharper now. You're being ridiculous. I didn't respond. I didn't even look back. I just walked, one step after another. And then I reached the front door, wrapped my fingers around the handle, and opened it. The cold air rushed in, cutting through the warmth of the house, our house. No, not anymore. Not ours. Not mine. Just theirs. And they could keep it. Because I was done. Completely, entirely done. I stepped out, letting the door shut behind me with a soft click. And I didn't look back. Not once. Not when my phone started buzzing in my pocket. Not when Deborah called my name again, her voice edging towards something almost panicked. Not when I got into my car, started the engine, and pulled away from the house I had built with my own hands. I had walked away from a lifetime of sacrifice. And for the first time in 30 years, I felt free. They thought they had won. They thought they could laugh it off, brush it aside, let time smooth over the wounds they inflicted. But they had no idea what was coming next. Because the thing about taking someone for granted, you never realize what they truly gave you, until they take it all back. I drove through the quiet streets of Rosewood Heights, my fingers gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. The streetlights cast long shadows across the road, their glow blurring slightly as my vision swam with the weight of the evening. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even shocked anymore. I was just done. Done pretending. Done excusing. Done sacrificing for people who had made it abundantly clear that my worth to them began and ended with how much money I could hand over. It was a strange thing to realize, that the family you had built your entire world around had never truly considered you a part of theirs. And now, they were about to feel what that meant. As I pulled into the parking lot of a small motel on the outskirts of town, I reached for my phone. Not to call Deborah. Not to respond to the barrage of messages and missed calls that had started the moment I walked out the door. I had no interest in what they had to say. Instead, I opened my banking app. For years, I had handled our finances alone. It had been a necessity, really. Deborah had never cared about managing money, and Sophia had never been interested in understanding where all the luxury she enjoyed came from. So I had managed it all. The mortgage, the credit cards, the savings accounts, the monthly deposits into Sophia's checking account, the household expenses Deborah never even glanced at, the medical insurance that covered not just my family, but her mother as well. I had funded their entire world, and they had laughed in my face. That ends tonight. With a few taps, I froze the joint account Deborah had access to. Her credit cards? Canceled. The mortgage auto payments? Stopped. The monthly allowance Sophia received like clockwork? Gone. I moved my personal savings into a new, separate account, one with only my name on it. I wasn't a fool. I knew Deborah would see the changes soon. She'd call the bank, try to override the restrictions, throw a fit when she realized that, for the first time in her life, she had no control over me. And then she'd panic. And that's what I was waiting for. I set the phone down, leaning back against the cheap motel headboard, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in my life, I felt light. I had spent decades giving. Tonight, for the first time ever, I had taken back. And they were about to realize just how much I had given them. The first signs of desperation. I woke up to 26 missed calls. I let them sit there, untouched, as I went about my morning. By the time I had showered, grabbed coffee from the lobby, and stepped outside into the crisp morning air, the messages had started rolling in. First, Deborah. Malcolm, what the hell is going on? My card just got declined at the store. Did you forget to pay the mortgage? I just got an email about a late fee. Call me now? Okay, this isn't funny. My accounts are frozen. I can't access anything. Fix this. Then, Sophia. Dad, my card isn't working. Did something happen with the bank? Dad, answer me. Mom's freaking out. Okay, seriously, what's going on? I have bills to pay. Are you mad about the wedding? Come on, Dad. It wasn't personal. You're making a huge deal out of nothing. Oh, there it was. The entitlement. The casual dismissal. The assumption that I would cave. They still didn't get it. They still thought I was playing a game. I smirked, sipping my coffee, as I scrolled to the next message. Deborah again. Malcolm, you are acting childish. You can't just cut us off like this. We are your family. There it was. The family card. I exhaled slowly, setting the phone down. They weren't worried about me. They weren't calling because they had realized their mistake. They were panicking because they had just lost their safety net. And they had no idea what to do. The first phone call. It didn't take long. By noon, my phone was ringing again. I let it go to voicemail the first 2 times. But by the third, I was curious. I answered. Malcolm. Deborah's voice was shrill, breathless. I could hear noise in the background, probably the bank. Morning, Deborah, I said, calmly sipping my coffee. There was a pause. She hadn't expected me to sound so at ease. What the hell is going on? She snapped. Why can't I access our accounts? Why is everything frozen? I hummed. Huh, that's weird. Malcolm, this isn't funny. Who said I was joking? Silence. Then, quieter, more controlled. Okay, I get that you're upset. But this is ridiculous. You're not thinking straight. Oh, I'm thinking perfectly straight, I said. Probably for the first time in years. Another pause. Then a scoff. So what? You're punishing us? That's what this is. No, Deborah, I said, my voice steady. This isn't punishment. This is me resigning. Resigning? She repeated. From my role as your personal bank. A sharp inhale. Then anger. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities, Malcolm. I laughed. Actually laughed. Responsibilities? I echoed. You mean like the responsibility of paying for a wedding I wasn't even invited to? More silence. She had no response for that. And that silence? That was the moment I knew I had won. I didn't need to explain myself. Didn't need to argue. Didn't need to yell. They had played their hand. And now, they were watching everything crumble. The aftermath. By the end of the week, Deborah had maxed out every credit card she still had access to. The mortgage was officially 2 weeks late. Sophia's lifestyle had come to a screeching halt. And me? I was fine. Better than fine. I was free. I hadn't realized just how much weight I had been carrying until I set it all down. They had spent years using me, draining me, expecting me to keep giving without hesitation. They thought I was predictable. They thought I would always come back. But they had made one critical mistake. They had forced me to see the truth. And once I had seen it, there was no going back. So as I sat in my rented apartment, staring at the new life unfolding in front of me, I smiled. Because this wasn't the end of the story. No, this was just the beginning of their regret. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one who had to fix it. The thing about people who take you for granted is that they never see the consequences coming. They assume you'll always be there, waiting, ready, willing to forgive, to fix things, to continue playing your role. And for years, I had been the provider, the problem solver, the man who always came through. But when I walked away, when I stopped playing their game, that's when the real panic set in. Because for the first time in their lives, they had to fend for themselves. And they were not prepared. The first few days. At first, they thought it was a mistake. Deborah must have assumed it was a temporary inconvenience, a bank issue, a technical glitch. Sophia probably thought I was just sulking, that I'd cool off in a day or two and everything would go back to normal. But by the third day, reality had started to sink in. Deborah's credit cards were still declined. The mortgage payment hadn't gone through. Sophia's account was still empty, and their safety net was gone. Permanently. I hadn't just stopped helping. I had shut down their entire financial world. And now? They were desperate. The flood of messages. By the fourth day, my phone was blowing up. Deborah was alternating between angry demands and pathetic pleas. Malcolm, what the hell is going on? I just got an overdraft notice. Fix this. I can't access any of our savings. What did you do? This is insane. You can't just leave me like this. We have bills. I don't know what's gotten into you, but we need to talk. Please, Malcolm, just call me. Then there was Sophia. At first, she tried to be casual. Hey, Dad. So, I think something's wrong with my bank account. Can you check? Maybe there was an error? Then, frustration. Dad, I have rent due. I need that money. Are you seriously ignoring me? Oh my God, Dad. This is childish. Just fix it already. And then, panic. Dad, please. I don't have enough to cover my bills this month. Just send it this one time, and I swear, I'll never ask again. I read the messages slowly, sipping my coffee, feeling nothing. No guilt. No hesitation. Just satisfaction. Because this was them finally understanding what I had known for years. I was never appreciated. Only expected. And they were finally feeling what it was like to be on their own. The calls start coming. By the fifth day, the messages weren't enough. Now they were calling. Nonstop. The first call came from Deborah. I let it go to voicemail. The second came 2 minutes later. Ignored. Then, Sophia. Rejected. Then Deborah again. Pick up the damn phone, Malcolm. I let them stew in their panic. By nightfall, the calls had slowed, but the voicemails had piled up. I played one, just to hear how desperate they were getting. Deborah's voice came through the speaker, tightly controlled, but laced with frustration. Malcolm, this isn't funny. You need to fix this. Right now, I can't even buy groceries. My cards are all declined. What are you trying to prove? I smirked. I get that you're mad about the wedding, she continued, her voice soothing now, manipulative. But this is cruel. Malcolm, you're punishing your own family, your own daughter. Do you really want to be that man? There it was. The guilt trip. The attempt to make me feel like the villain. I deleted the voicemail. Because I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. The breaking point. By the end of the first week, the panic had hit full force. Sophia had maxed out her remaining credit card. Deborah had called every bank representative she could. They had reached out to relatives, trying to borrow money. And when that didn't work, they started to crack. That night, my phone rang again. I glanced at the screen. Deborah. I almost ignored it, until I noticed something different. She wasn't just calling. She was FaceTiming. I let it ring for a few seconds before answering. And when her face appeared on the screen, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked unraveled. Her hair was a mess. Her face pale, her usual poise gone. Malcolm, she breathed, her voice raw. I raised an eyebrow. Something wrong. She stared at me, as if trying to figure out who I was. Because this Malcolm, the one who was calm, indifferent, untouchable, wasn't the man she was used to manipulating. We need to talk, she said finally. We are talking, I said, sipping my coffee. Her jaw tightened. Malcolm, I don't have time for this. We can't keep living like this. The bank won't reverse the freezes. The house payment is due in a few days. Sophia is panicking. And Deborah blinked. And what does that have to do with me? Her mouth opened, then shut. Because she didn't have an answer. For decades, I had been the fixer. The one who made things right. Now, I wasn't lifting a damn finger. Malcolm, she tried again. I know we hurt you. I know you're upset. But this isn't just about us. This is about our family. Family, I echoed. She nodded quickly, hope sparking in her eyes. Yes, family. We need to work this out. You need to come home. I let out a small laugh, shaking my head. Deborah, let me ask you something. She hesitated. What? I leaned forward, my expression turning cold. Did I look like family when you threw a wedding without me? Silence. Complete. Utter. Silence. Deborah's face drained of color. Because she knew. She knew there was no coming back from this. "Good night, Deborah," I said calmly. And then, I ended the call. The final realization. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Because for the first time, they weren't my problem anymore. I wasn't the safety net. I wasn't the solution. I was just a man who had finally woken up. And tomorrow, they were going to wake up too. Because this wasn't temporary. This wasn't a lesson. This was permanent. And they had no one to blame but themselves. I knew the moment was coming. The moment where they stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding and started realizing what they had actually done. It had taken longer than I expected. They had wasted time yelling, blaming, demanding, convinced that their outrage would somehow reverse the situation. But when their credit cards stayed frozen, when the mortgage default notices arrived, when Sophia's landlord started asking about her late rent, and when the groceries in the fridge started running low, that's when they understood. And that's when they came to find me. The knock on my door. It was a quiet morning. Peaceful. The kind of morning where I could sip my coffee, enjoy the fresh air, and feel the weight of my old life fully lifting off my shoulders. I had been staying in a furnished apartment across town. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, a space free from their expectations, their demands, their endless cycle of entitlement. I had just settled into my chair, my phone on silent, when the knocking started. Loud. Persistent. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I already knew who it was. Deborah and Sophia. And just like that, the moment had arrived. I set my coffee down slowly, exhaled through my nose, and walked to the door. I let them knock one more time. Harder. Then, I opened it. Face to face with desperation. Deborah looked exhausted, her hair a mess, her eyes dark with frustration. Sophia, standing just behind her, wasn't much better. The confidence, the smug attitude, the casual dismissal from before? Gone. What stood before me now were two people who finally understood what they had lost. "Malcolm," Deborah started, her voice tight, controlled. I leaned against the doorframe. Calm. Unbothered. Waiting. She took a breath. "We need to talk." I tilted my head slightly. "Oh. About what?" Sophia shifted behind her mother. "Dad, come on. Don't do this." I raised an eyebrow. "Do what?" Deborah let out a sharp breath. "Enough of this," she snapped. "You've made your point. We get it. But this? This needs to end. This?" I repeated, my voice even. "Yes, this," she hissed, crossing her arms. "Your little act. Your silent treatment. Your refusal to fix what you broke." I actually let out a short laugh at that. "I broke. You think I broke something?" I asked. Obviously, she shot back. "You destroyed our finances overnight. I can't access anything. I can't pay for the house. Sophia is struggling. What did you think would happen?" I leaned against the doorway. Oh, I knew exactly what would happen. Sophia's voice was smaller now, more hesitant. "Dad, please." I looked at her. My daughter. The same daughter who had stood in front of me days ago, shrugged, and told me my absence at her wedding wasn't personal. The same daughter who had spent years taking and taking, never giving a damn about what it cost me. And now? Now she wanted mercy. I let the silence stretch between us. Then I smiled. "No." The outburst. Deborah's eyes widened. Sophia took a step forward. "Dad, wait." But Deborah wasn't willing to plead. No, she still thought she could win. "You're being ridiculous, Malcolm," she snapped. "This is petty. It's childish. It's—" "No," I interrupted. She blinked. "You don't get to stand here and call me ridiculous, Deborah," I said, my voice cool and controlled. "You don't get to call me petty when you and Sophia threw a wedding that I paid for, without me. You don't get to act like I'm the one who's unreasonable when you spent years treating me like an afterthought." Deborah's lips pressed into a thin line. Sophia swallowed hard. "That's not fair," she murmured. I laughed again. "Fair?" I repeated. "Tell me, Sophia, was it fair when you stood in front of me and told me my presence at your wedding didn't matter? Was it fair when you cashed every check I ever sent you, knowing you'd never once invited me into your life?" She looked away. "It wasn't like that," she mumbled. "Then how was it?" I pressed. She had no answer. Neither did Deborah. Because there wasn't an excuse left that I would accept. The shift. Deborah sighed, rubbing her temples. "All right," she said, her voice softer now. "I'll admit, we should have handled things differently. Should have handled things differently." I let the words settle in my chest. They weren't apologizing. They weren't admitting they were wrong. They were just maneuvering. trying to say just enough to convince me to fix everything again. I see, I said finally. You should have handled things differently. Deborah nodded quickly. Yes, exactly. And now we can fix it. We? I echoed, smirking. Another pause. Deborah swallowed. Malcolm. She tried again. Come home. Let's move past this. We can fix it together. There it was. The plea. The expectation. Because to her, this was just another fight. She thought that if she offered just enough fake regret, I would step back into my old role. She thought I would take my wallet out and fix the problem, just like I always did. But I wasn't that man anymore. And I never would be again. The final goodbye. No, I said. Sophia's head snapped up. What? No. I repeated, shrugging. I'm not fixing this. I'm not coming home. I'm not paying for anything else. Deborah's face twisted. You're seriously just abandoning your family? I smiled. No, Deborah. My family abandoned me a long time ago. I'm just finally accepting it. Her mouth opened. Closed. She had nothing left to say. I took one last look at Sophia, waiting to see if she'd try, really try. But she just stood there, silent. That was my final confirmation. She was her mother's daughter. I exhaled slowly and stepped back inside. Deborah's voice came sharply behind me. You'll regret this, Malcolm, she spat. I turned one last time. No, Deborah, I said, smiling. You will. Then, I shut the door in their faces. I didn't check my phone for hours. Didn't listen to the voicemails. Didn't care about whatever excuses or insults they had left. Because this was the moment they had never thought would happen. The moment they realized that I wasn't coming back. And now, they were truly, completely on their own. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. And it felt damn good. I didn't expect silence. Not right away. Not from them. Deborah and Sophia weren't the type to accept consequences gracefully. They had spent years knowing that no matter what they did, no matter how careless, entitled, or dismissive they were, I would always be there to clean up the mess. So when I shut the door in their faces, I fully expected round two to begin. The shouting, the guilt trips, the threats. But for the first time, they had nothing left to say. That told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just angry. They were afraid. Afraid because this time, there was no safety net. And I had finally, fully walked away. The first public sign of collapse. It took less than a week before the cracks started showing. Deborah had never worked a day in her life. She had built her entire identity around being the wife of a financially stable man. The woman who hosted dinner parties, made snide comments about other people's struggles, and shopped like money grew on trees. And for a long time, it had worked for her. Because I had let it. But now she was struggling. And people were noticing. The first time I heard about it, I was in line at a coffee shop, waiting for my order when a voice behind me caught my attention. I swear, I saw Deborah at the grocery store using coupons. Coupons? Another voice laughed. No way. She once told me only broke people use those. I'm serious. She was arguing with the cashier over a discount. I thought she was going to lose it. I couldn't help but smirk. I could picture it now, Deborah, standing in the checkout line, realizing in real time that she was no longer above consequences. That for the first time in decades, she was living like everyone else. And she hated it. Sophia's fall from grace. But it wasn't just Deborah who was feeling the burn. Sophia was crashing even harder. For years, she had been the golden girl. The one who bragged about her perfect life, flaunted the expensive gifts she never had to pay for, and acted like she was born lucky instead of just being funded by me. Now she was struggling to keep up the act. Her friends noticed first. The ones who used to go on trips with her, dine at expensive restaurants, expect lavish birthday gifts. Because suddenly, she wasn't offering to pay anymore. She wasn't shopping like she used to. She wasn't bragging. And in their world, that meant something was wrong. I didn't even have to check my phone for updates. Because people talked. I saw Sophia at that boutique she loves, but she didn't buy anything. Yeah? I heard she's been dodging our usual brunch meetups. You think something happened? Oh, something happened, all right. She lost her golden ticket. She lost me. The mortgage disaster. A month later, the house was in trouble. It wasn't immediate. They had a little cushion from the savings they had left, but it didn't last long. Because they had never learned how to manage money. And it showed. The first missed mortgage payment was a warning. The second one came with late fees and penalties. By the third, they were in serious trouble. And then I got a call from the bank. Mr. Carter, we're reaching out regarding the property on Ashwood Lane. I sipped my coffee. Oh, what about it? We've noticed that payments have been delayed, and given that your name is still listed as primary on the mortgage, we wanted to check in. I smirked. Oh, I appreciate that. But that's no longer my responsibility. There was a pause. I'm sorry, sir. Are you saying you're surrendering the property? I'm saying that the people living there need to figure it out on their own. Another pause. I understand, sir. We'll proceed with the standard process. That was all I needed to hear. Because standard process meant foreclosure. And Deborah and Sophia were about to learn the hard way what happened when the person they had used for decades finally stopped paying the bills. The relatives start talking. It was only a matter of time before word spread. Deborah had spent years looking down on other people, mocking their struggles, acting superior, pretending like she was part of some elite class simply because she had been married to me. But now she was the struggling one. And people were watching. Did you hear about Deborah? I heard she's late on the house payments. I thought they had money. What happened? What happened? They took me for granted. That's what happened. The final call from Sophia. I knew it was coming. The moment when Sophia would finally break down and admit she needed me. And when it came, it was late at night. My phone buzzed, and for a moment, I considered ignoring it. But curiosity won. I picked up. Dad. Her voice was small, weak. I said nothing, letting the silence weigh on her. Dad, She hesitated. I don't know what to do. I leaned back in my chair. About what? She swallowed hard. Everything. The bills. The house. Mom is freaking out. Her voice cracked. I think we're going to lose everything. I let that hang in the air. Because that was the moment she finally understood. Not just the financial consequences, but the truth. That I wasn't coming back. That I wasn't bailing them out. That for the first time in her entire life, she was going to have to face the consequences of her choices. I'm sorry, she whispered. I sighed, rubbing my temple. Are you sorry, Sophia? Or are you just scared? She didn't answer right away. Because she didn't know the difference. And that was the biggest problem of all. I just want things to go back to how they were, she said finally. I smiled. They never will. And with that, I hung up. The aftermath. By the end of the second month, the house was officially in foreclosure. Deborah tried to fight it, tried to appeal to the bank, but without my income, she couldn't keep up. Sophia? She had to move in with a friend. And me? I moved on. I had peace. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty, because they had spent years treating me like I was replaceable, like I was nothing more than a wallet. And now, they finally understood the truth. I was the only reason they ever had anything at all. And when I walked away, they lost everything. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. And it had been a long time coming. I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, the cool morning breeze brushing against my skin as I sipped my coffee. For the first time in decades, my life was quiet. No urgent emails about payments. No last-minute calls from Deborah demanding money for something she forgot to tell me about. No passive-aggressive messages from Sophia, guilt-tripping me into covering her lifestyle choices. Just peace. And I was finally starting to understand what that felt like. A life without obligations. It had been 3 months since I had cut them off. 3 months since I had walked away from the house, from the responsibilities, from the never-ending cycle of giving while receiving nothing in return. At first, I wasn't sure what to do with myself. For years, my entire existence had revolved around providing for other people. My schedule had been dictated by their needs, my finances by their demands, my peace by their problems. Now, there was none of that. I was free to wake up when I wanted, to spend money on myself for once, to go places I had always wanted to go, not because someone else wanted a vacation, but because I simply felt like it. I had spent so long giving to others that I had forgotten what it felt like to live for myself. And now I was relearning that. And it felt incredible. The final updates on their downfall. I hadn't spoken to Deborah or Sophia since that last phone call. I had no desire to. But that didn't mean I didn't hear about them. Because word traveled fast. Deborah had tried to delay the inevitable. But within weeks, the house had officially gone into foreclosure. She had been forced to leave. I had heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had moved in with a distant cousin, one she had spent years looking down on. I smiled at the irony of it. The woman who had once boasted about never needing anyone was now sleeping in someone else's spare bedroom. And Sophia? She had lost everything. She was still married, but it was clear that her new life with Tyler wasn't going as she had expected. Because without my money cushioning her lifestyle, she was forced to live within his budget, and it wasn't enough for her. A friend of mine, who worked in finance, had told me he saw her at a restaurant with some friends one night. They had gone out expecting Sophia to cover the bill, something she had always done in the past. But when the check came, she had hesitated, fumbled with her purse. Then, she had to admit she couldn't afford to pay for everyone. I could only imagine the humiliation. And the best part? She did it to herself. The message I didn't expect. One evening, just as I was getting back from the gym, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. Hello. A pause. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Dad. I almost laughed. I almost hung up right then and there. Because after everything, after the lies, the disrespect, the blatant use of my generosity, she had the nerve to call me now? Sophia, I said evenly. There was another pause. Then, a shaky breath. I didn't think you'd pick up, she admitted. Why did you call? She hesitated. I don't know. That wasn't the truth. She knew exactly why she called, but she wasn't ready to say it. How's Tyler? I asked casually, taking a sip of water. He's fine, she said quickly. Too quickly. Oh, so things weren't going well. And your mother? Sophia exhaled. She's managing. Translation? She was barely getting by, and they both wanted me to feel bad about it. Is that why you called? I asked, my voice unreadable. To give me an update on your mother's struggles? No, she said quickly. Another pause. She started, her voice breaking a little. I miss you, Dad. I let those words sit in the air. Because for years, I had waited to hear them. I had waited for her to show some kind of remorse. Some kind of understanding. But now, I wasn't sure if I even cared anymore. You miss me? I repeated, not letting my tone reveal anything. Yes, she whispered. Or do you miss what I used to do for you? Silence. And that was my answer. She wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because she missed the comfort of having me take care of everything. Dad, please, she said after a moment, her voice small. I don't want things to be like this. Can't we just talk? I smiled slightly. We are talking, Sophia. She exhaled sharply. You know what I mean. I did. But I wasn't interested. I spent years talking, I said. Years trying to be part of your life. Years giving and giving. Waiting for the day you'd see me as more than a bank account. She didn't say anything. And you never did, I continued. Not until it was too late. Another pause. So that's it, she asked finally. That's it, I confirmed. You're just done with me? There was a time when hearing those words would have wrecked me. When the idea of being done with my own daughter would have felt like a failure. But now it just felt like freedom. I didn't walk away from you, Sophia, I said calmly. You walked away from me. You and your mother both. Silence. And I finally just stopped chasing you. Another long pause. Then, finally, she broke. I'm sorry. It was the first real apology she had ever given me. And maybe, in another lifetime, it would have meant something. But not now. Not anymore. I sighed. Take care of yourself, Sophia. And before she could say anything else, I hung up, closing the chapter. I sat in silence for a long time after that call. Not because I was sad. Not because I regretted anything. But because I knew, truly knew, that I was done. She had apologized. But I had moved on. And I wasn't interested in reopening a door that should have been shut years ago. So I turned my phone on silent, poured myself a drink, and stepped onto my balcony. The night was calm. My life was finally my own. And for the first time in 30 years, I was at peace. I didn't expect a red carpet. I didn't need applause or camera flashes. Honestly, I didn't even need a seat at the front. I just wanted to be there, to show up for her, to make her proud, to remind her that she didn't get here alone. That behind every milestone of hers, there was someone quietly standing in the shadows, clapping the loudest. That someone was me. That night, I stepped out of the car a little earlier than planned. I wanted to surprise her. The black tux I wore was the same one from our wedding, tailored again, a little tighter around the shoulders now. I held a small, elegant box in my hand. Inside was a Mont Blanc timepiece, limited edition, black leather band, sapphire crystal face. She'd once mentioned it casually when passing through a boutique in Milan. Understated but powerful, she said. Just like you. I walked up to the venue, heart light, steps firm. The lights from the ballroom streamed through tall windows like golden silk. It was Argento and Gray's 10-year anniversary, a night Isla had been working toward for months. Actually, for years. and I'd helped build it, piece by piece. From quiet dinners discussing strategy to weekends I gave up so she could rehearse speeches. From seed capital to late-night coffee runs. The foyer was buzzing with guests. Men in tailored suits, women in elegant gowns, champagne flutes clinking softly as jazz floated in the background. I approached the reception desk, smiling. "Reed Callahan," I said, adjusting my cuffs slightly. "Here for Isla." The young woman behind the desk typed something. Then again, her expression shifted. "I'm sorry," she said, voice polite but brisk. "I don't see that name on the list." I blinked, surprised but calm. "Could you check again?" "I'm her husband." She hesitated and glanced toward a man standing near the door, earpiece in his ear, hand resting on his belt. "Security. I'll call someone," she offered, clearly uncomfortable. Moments later, a tall man in a charcoal gray suit walked toward us. I recognized him instantly. Damon, Isla's CFO. We'd met a few times. He gave me a cursory nod. "Reed. Hey. There seems to be a mix-up with the guest list," I said lightly, still holding the gift box. Damon didn't bother to look at the list. "This event's just for core staff and major stakeholders." I frowned. "I helped fund this event." "Right," he said, glancing at his watch. "But you're not technically part of the leadership team." That stung. I opened my mouth to reply, but he beat me to it, turning to the guard nearby. "He's not on the list. Please escort him out." The guard stepped forward gently but firmly. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." I didn't speak. "Not yet." And then Damon, as he turned back toward the ballroom, said it. Not even under his breath. "Get this beggar out of here." That's when the room seemed to slow. "Beggar?" I stood there, tux perfectly pressed, holding a gift that cost more than the average rent in the city, and somehow in their world, I was a beggar? I looked past him into the ballroom. There she was, Isla, standing under a chandelier, surrounded by executives and board members. Her dress was emerald green, her smile wide. She was radiant, powerful, exactly how I'd always wanted her to feel. But something inside me, something buried under years of quiet sacrifices, cracked. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. Instead, I turned. I walked back down the marble steps, past the valet who smiled politely and clearly had no idea what had just happened. I didn't give him the ticket for the car. I needed a moment. I walked 2 blocks in silence, still holding the box. My phone buzzed once, probably a promotional email. Not Isla. She didn't know yet. Or maybe she did. Maybe it was intentional. I wasn't sure what was worse. I sat on a cold bench outside a closed bakery and finally opened the box, not to look at the watch, but just to breathe. I stared at the clean design, the engraved backplate that said, "For all the time you gave me." The irony nearly made me laugh. It wasn't just a watch. It was a thank you, a symbol, of time spent supporting her dreams, of hours and years I gave without asking for much. Not credit, not a seat at the board, just respect, just a place at her side. And yet, on the night of her biggest celebration, the man who watched her rise from shaky proposals to Forbes interviews had become invisible. Worse, unwelcome. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I was numb. Numb in the way you get when you realize the person you built your world around never really built theirs around you. I sat there for almost an hour, thinking, replaying conversations. The times I said, "Let's wait on that vacation," put it into the company instead. The nights I packed her lunches before big pitch meetings. The time I stayed up until 4 a.m. adjusting her keynote slides because her designer quit last minute. How many of those sacrifices had become expectations? And how many of those expectations had turned into erasure? I walked home. I didn't slam doors or throw the watch against the wall like some bitter ex in a soap opera. No, that wasn't me. I walked into our apartment, clean, minimalist, filled with curated art pieces she loved, and placed the watch on the marble counter. Then I stood still, and something in me shifted. It wasn't rage. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. I realized that somewhere along the line, I had been edited out of the story. I was the invisible ink in the footnotes. And now they were celebrating the novel, pretending I never helped write the first chapters. I looked around at the space we built together. And for the first time in a long time, I started thinking, not about how to support her next move, but how to make mine. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee maker like it might give me answers. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. No footsteps on the marble tiles. No humming from the bathroom as Isla got ready. No scent of her perfume floating through the hall. Just silence. Heavy and clear. She'd stayed out after the gala. Of course she had. Probably went straight to the hotel suite they'd booked for the night. A perk I'd prepaid with my own card 3 months ago when I still believed I'd be at her side, smiling for pictures and clinking glasses. When I still believed I was part of the journey. I took my coffee black. No cream today. Something about sweetness felt wrong. As I stood by the window looking over the city we'd carved our lives into, my mind wandered back through the years. Quiet, steady memories that now played like proof in a courtroom. We met when Isla was just launching Argento and Gray. Back then, it was her and a small rented office with peeling paint and a stubborn thermostat. I remember bringing her takeout during late nights, setting up a makeshift whiteboard with sticky notes because she couldn't afford one. I remember pulling out a small loan under my name to help cover her first marketing run. It's just until we land that first big client, she'd said. You'll get it back. I wasn't looking for reimbursement. I was looking for partnership, for something we could build together. But somehow, over time, it became her dream and my responsibility, her spotlight and my shadow. She started climbing fast, networking, closing deals, building a brand. And I clapped. I clapped even when she stopped introducing me as her husband at some events, opting instead for Reed, he works in finance, as if that explained my presence better. She loved the image. The story of the girl boss who made it on her own, who rose without help. And I let her tell it. Because I loved her. But now? Now it felt like I'd paid for a ticket to a movie I wasn't allowed to watch. Worse, like I'd funded the production and been cut from the credits. I pulled open the drawer next to the fridge where we kept old receipts and warranties. Most people forgot about those drawers, messy little timelines of financial choices. I didn't. I kept every receipt, every bank statement, every invoice tagged and filed. I'd always been meticulous. Isla teased me about it once, said I was financially romantic. I guess that's one way to say, you're doing all the boring, important things while I take the glory. That drawer held our real history. A lease payment here. A conference fee there. New laptops for her interns. Office chairs. Flights to meet clients. Promotional videos. Staff bonuses, 12 of them, signed under my account. Most people would have seen a pile of expenses. I saw love letters. The kind that don't get framed or posted on Instagram. As I sifted through them, I realized something. I wasn't just forgotten. I'd been used. Silently. Willingly. And maybe that was the worst part. How easily I'd let it happen in the name of love. When Isla finally walked through the door at noon, she looked collected. No shame. No apology. Just her usual poised self in designer sunglasses and a blazer I'd gifted her last Christmas. She took them off and looked at me like I was a minor inconvenience. Reed, she said, setting down her bag. About last night, I raised a hand gently. You don't have to explain. But of course she did. It was a curated event. We had to keep the guest list tight. Sponsors, investors, internal leads, you didn't think I qualified. Her eyes darted. It wasn't personal. That was the line that did it. That's when I finally looked her in the eye and said, it was always personal. You just stopped seeing me as part of it. She rolled her eyes. Reed, don't do this. You're being dramatic. I almost laughed. Dramatic? After being thrown out of a party I helped pay for? After hearing someone call me a beggar while my wife stood beneath chandeliers I'd funded? I didn't argue. Instead, I walked over to the dining table, placed a folder down, and slid it toward her. You want to talk facts? Let's talk. She opened it, confused. Inside were neatly printed spreadsheets, expenses tracked over the past 7 years. My name, my cards, my accounts, a timeline of invisible support. Each column was labeled, date, purpose, payment type, amount, notes. Total support value, $198,740.34. She stared at the number. What is this? Our story. The part you never tell. She said nothing. I leaned back in my chair. You didn't just forget me. You erased me. And I let you. Because I thought love was about giving. But at some point, love became an invoice with only one name at the bottom. Reed, she started, but stopped. I didn't ask you to do all this. You expected it. And I kept delivering. Her expression shifted, defensive, proud. This isn't fair. You always said you believed in what I was building. I did, I said. But now I realize you were never building it with me. You were building it on me. The silence between us felt thick, almost physical. Like we were sitting in the ruins of a home we both pretended was still standing. I stood up slowly and looked at her for a long moment. "You don't need to apologize," I said. "I'm not looking for that." "Then what do you want?" I gave a small, tired smile. "Nothing. For once, I want absolutely nothing." And I meant it. There's a special kind of grief that comes from realizing you were never truly seen, that you were loved for your usefulness, not your presence. And that once your usefulness runs out, you become disposable. That night, I didn't touch dinner. I sat on the balcony, sipping a glass of wine alone, watching the city lights flicker on. Isla stayed in her office down the hall. Doors closed. Walls growing. I didn't cry. I didn't pack a bag. Not yet. I wasn't done thinking. I wasn't done feeling. But the shift had already begun. And somewhere deep inside me, a quiet voice whispered, "She doesn't get to do this again. Not without consequence." I didn't plan to go to the gala. Not really. Originally, I thought I'd just leave the gift on her desk, send a quick text, and head back home. Let her shine. Let her have her moment. That's what she always said she needed, space to be seen. And for years, I gave it. But something about that night pulled at me. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe it was foolish hope. That maybe, just maybe, after everything I'd poured into her company, into her, I'd show up, and she'd look at me like she used to. With warmth. With gratitude. With even a sliver of the love I'd spent years wrapping around her like armor. So I ironed the tux. It wasn't new, but it still fit like it had the first time. The same one I wore when we danced under dim fairy lights on our wedding night. Back then, we couldn't afford a ballroom. We'd rented a small community space, filled it with second-hand string lights, and borrowed chairs. She had whispered to me, "Someday, we'll host something in a place like that," pointing at a glossy ad in a bridal magazine. I remembered that ad now, because it looked eerily similar to where the Argento and Grey Gala was being held. The irony was sharp. We made it, and I had helped us get there. So I went. Quietly. No driver. No fanfare. I booked a cab, stepped out 2 blocks away, and walked in with the timepiece in my inner pocket, fingers resting against the box like I could transfer some warmth into it. I passed guests in velvet and silk, voices spilling into the street. My name wasn't on the list. I already knew that. I wasn't here for a seat. I was here to see it with my own eyes. I stood on the sidewalk across from the entrance, behind the valet station, just out of view. And there she was. Isla, my wife. Centerpiece of the night. She glided down the carpet like she was born for it. Cameras flashed. Her silver gown caught every light like a mirror. She waved, smiled, laughed, rehearsed but captivating. I watched her pose with executives, board members, and, yes, Jared. Jared. Tall. Tan. That fake casual confidence he always carried like a trophy. He was standing too close. Too familiar. Whispering something in her ear that made her laugh in a way I hadn't heard in months. Not at home. Not with me. I stepped back into the shadows, my stomach twisting, not from jealousy, but from clarity. I didn't belong here. Not because I wasn't worthy, but because they had carefully edited me out. I tried not to be bitter. Really. I tried to remind myself that ambition changes people. That success shifts the dynamics. That sometimes, people forget themselves in the process of becoming someone new. But the more I watched, the harder it became to excuse what I was seeing. They toasted with crystal glasses. The ballroom, draped in white and gold, held over 100 guests. All handpicked. All included. And yet, not one of them had my name on their lips. Not even hers. I stepped closer, drawn in by the sound of her voice over the mic. A toast. "I want to thank the people who believed in me when this was just a dream," she said, chin lifted, eyes sparkling. "To my team, my partners, and my co-founder in spirit, Jared Gray, you are the other half of this company's heartbeat." The room clapped. Loudly. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. She continued, "To those who gave me space to grow, who cheered from the sidelines, thank you. This isn't just my night. It's ours. Sidelines. That's where I live now. A faceless cheerleader in the shadows. A thank you lumped in with general gratitude. Not a name. Not a face. Not even a nod. I looked down at the gift in my pocket. It felt heavier than before. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I think I was still holding on to some hope. So I did something stupid. I tried to go in. Not to crash it. Not to make a scene. Just to say congratulations. To see her. Face to face. Maybe feel like I existed again. That's when the security guard stopped me. The same scene replayed. Name. I told him. He didn't even look at the list. You're not cleared for entry. I asked, quietly, if he could check again. He didn't. Instead, he looked to the side, and there stood Jared. He walked over with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Reed. Hey, sorry man. This is kind of an internal thing. I looked him over. Internal? Yeah, you know. Staff? Stakeholders. It's been tight. I paid for half the venue, I said calmly. He raised his eyebrows. You were reimbursed. I wasn't. He gave a low chuckle, like I was making something awkward. It's not the time or place, buddy. You'll make her uncomfortable. And that's when I saw Isla, watching, from inside the doorway. Our eyes met. She didn't come forward, didn't wave, didn't say anything, just looked. And then she turned her back. The guard took a step forward. Sir, I'm leaving, I said, lifting my hand. But Jared, because he couldn't help himself, leaned in and muttered, this is her world now. Might be time to stop holding her back. That was it. I didn't punch him, didn't throw the box, didn't scream. I just smiled. That quiet, chilling kind of smile. Because I knew something he didn't. He might have had the lights, the champagne, the crowd tonight. But the moment she needed the foundation of that world, the quiet deposits, the funding, the favors, the loyalty, it would all start shaking. And I would no longer be there to hold it still. I walked away, the box still in my pocket. I passed the photographers, the valet, the crowds. I didn't turn back. Not once. Because I'd finally seen it clearly. I wasn't a part of the celebration. I was the scaffolding they used to build it, and then discarded the moment the building stood tall enough. And now? Now I was done pretending that was okay. When I got home that night, I didn't switch on the lights. I didn't need to. The apartment was already too familiar. Every chair, every painting, every shelf placed just how she wanted it. I sat down at the dining table, the gift box still in my jacket pocket. The weight of it had shifted. It no longer felt like a symbol of appreciation. It felt like a receipt. A reminder of how long I'd been paying for a love that had quietly gone bankrupt. I reached for my laptop. It was sitting where I always left it, centered, charged, clean. I opened it like I had 100 times before. But tonight, it wasn't for spreadsheets or budgeting. It was for action. I went to the first tab I'd bookmarked weeks ago, our anniversary trip to Bora Bora. A private villa on the water, complete with a chef, couples massage, and underwater dining experience. I had paid the deposit in full, $13,500. A surprise. One I never got to reveal because she'd been too busy with back-to-back strategy sessions. Click. Canceled. Refund processed. Next, the Aspen Leadership Retreat. This one wasn't for us, but for her team. She told me the board needed a high-end bonding getaway to pitch to new investors. I'd paid the travel agency directly $18,000 for accommodations, ski passes, and executive lodging. Another favor. Another unthanked gift. Click. Access revoked. Confirmation email sent. Then came the corporate software license renewal, $7,400 from my consulting card. I logged into the vendor dashboard and updated the billing details to an empty shell account. Automatic renewal. Disabled. And the final blow, her upcoming executive lounge renovation. She wanted a private space in the office to think, complete with custom furniture and mood lighting. I'd already wired $21,400 to the design company, scheduled to complete in 4 weeks. I made a single phone call. Reed Callahan, I said, calm and polite. I'd like to cancel the upcoming installation. Please issue a stop order. The payment was personal, not corporate. I'll send written confirmation now. They complied. It took less than 90 minutes to undo over $60,000 worth of support. Money she never questioned. Support she never asked about twice. She just assumed it would be there, because I had always made sure it was. But not this time. By 2 a.m. I was still staring at my screen. The numbers weren't just digits. They were chapters of a story I hadn't realized I'd been writing alone. I thought about all the ways I'd said, I love you, over the years without ever using those words. In hotel confirmations, in paid invoices, in arranged meetings, fixed computers, last-minute florist runs, and don't worry, I've got it texts. And not once had she stopped to ask if I was okay, if I needed something, if I felt seen. She used to. In the beginning, she'd hug me from behind while I made coffee. She'd say things like, I couldn't do this without you, or you're my favorite person. And then those phrases stopped. They were replaced by, did you pay the caterer yet? Or can you call the driver? Slowly, love became logistics. Marriage became management. And now? Now I was reducing my role back to zero. I logged into our shared calendar and deleted myself from every upcoming event. No +1 at her award dinner. No appearance at her quarterly fundraiser. I even removed my saved contacts from her PR firm's holiday mailing list. And finally, I did something that made my chest feel tight. I opened the shared folder labeled Callahan Argento Finances. I created a copy, renamed it Final, then removed my access from the original. I wasn't just pulling the plug on funding. I was pulling the plug on pretending. At 3:12 a.m., I received a notification, calendar change alert, Aspen Retreat booking removed. I ignored it. Then came a second, vendor balance dispute, email from events manager. Then the text, ISLA, read, did you change something with the Aspen thing? Just got a weird message. I stared at the screen. Not hey, not can we talk, not are you okay? Just straight to the transaction. I didn't reply. I shut the laptop slowly and stood in the middle of the kitchen, breathing in the silence. I looked around at the glass jars on the shelf, labeled, color-coded, perfectly stacked. All her design. All her world. I built it, but it never became mine. I walked to the bedroom, slid the Montblanc watch box onto her pillow. Then I packed a bag, not to leave permanently, but enough to make the silence noticeable. As I zipped the suitcase, a memory crept in. Her voice from years ago. If I ever get too big for myself, promise me you'll remind me who I really am. I almost smiled, because this was that moment, and she hadn't even noticed it arrived. At exactly 7 p.m. the next evening, my phone lit up. I had just poured a glass of scotch, nothing fancy, just something smooth enough to take the edge off, and was sitting on the balcony of the hotel I checked into that morning. A small place. Quiet. Nothing like the marble and glass loft Isla and I called home. But it felt real. Simple. Honest. The screen buzzed again. I saw 2 missed calls. I let it ring out. Then came the texts. I saw read. Did you cancel the Bali suite? Isla. What's going on with the Aspen payment? The agency said the deposit bounced. Marcy, her assistant, hey. Sorry to bother you, but quick question. Did you change the payment method for the gala videographer? They emailed about a voided charge. Super confused. I took another sip and scrolled. Jared, yo, did you pull the plug on the caterer? What the hell, man? That one made me pause. Man, he had never called me that before. Never messaged me directly unless it was about logistics. Always filtered his needs through Isla. But now? Now they needed me. Not because they missed me, but because the foundation was crumbling, and the person who kept it level had finally stepped back. The flood came next. Ping, ping, ping. A waterfall of alerts from the payment processor. Notice, autopay failure, Argento and Gray annual licensing renewal. Reminder, travel itinerary voided. Contact your agent to reschedule. Warning, office renovation project paused due to insufficient funds. I set the phone down without replying, not because I was being cruel, but because silence, real, deliberate silence, speaks louder than any revenge speech or petty argument ever could. At 9:41 p.m., another call buzzed in. Then another. Then another. By the time I finished the scotch, the tally was 36 missed calls, 17 texts, and 2 voicemails, both from Isla. I didn't listen to them. Instead, I walked to the hotel lobby, handed the front desk a polite smile, and requested no further calls be patched through to my room. I turned off notifications, placed the phone face down on the nightstand, and for the first time in what felt like years, I went to sleep without a to-do list waiting in the morning. But rest doesn't always bring peace. I woke up at 6:13 a.m. to soft knocking. At first, I thought it was housekeeping. Then I heard it. That voice. Tired. A little frantic. Muffled through the door. Reed, are you in there? I sat up slowly. She knocked again. Please, just open the door. I didn't move right away. I just listened. Her breathing was uneven. No heels today. No confident footsteps or clipped tone. Just Isla. Raw. Stripped of pretense. Not the version she gave the media or the board. The version she only let me see when things went wrong. Still, I hesitated. It took 3 more knocks before I got up, pulled on a shirt, and opened the door. She looked nothing like the woman from the gala. No makeup, hair tied back, pale, wrinkled shirt like she hadn't changed since the night before. "Hi," she said, voice soft. She tried to smile, but it collapsed halfway. I stepped aside. She entered the room quietly, eyes scanning the small space. One bed, one chair, a half-open suitcase on the floor. No extravagance, no luxury, just me, as I've always been. "I've been trying to call," she said, wringing her hands. I saw. Silence stretched between us. She sat on the edge of the bed. I stayed by the window. "You didn't have to cancel everything," she said finally. It felt vindictive. I turned to her, calm. Was it vindictive to leave me off the guest list? To stand there while they called me a beggar? She looked down. That wasn't supposed to happen. The list was curated. For image. For your image, I corrected. She didn't argue. "I'm not trying to fight," she said, voice cracking a little. I didn't expect you to go this far." "This far?" I echoed. "You mean finally drawing a line? Is that what this is?" she whispered. "Drawing a line? Or erasing me?" I sat in the chair across from her. "No, Isla. I'm erasing myself. From a version of this marriage where I only existed when you needed a transaction. Where my love was measured in wire transfers and logistical favors. Where you celebrated with people who didn't even know my name. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten." I nodded. "Exactly. You didn't realize." She went quiet again, chewing on her lower lip. "The truth is," she said slowly, "I didn't want the world to see how much I still leaned on you. I wanted to look independent, strong, self-made. You could have been all those things," I said, without cutting me out. "I know," she admitted, tears now gathering. "I thought I was proving something." "You were," I said, "but not what you think." She looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time in years, I saw regret in her eyes that felt real. Not performative, not dramatic, just real. "I miss you," she said. "No," I replied gently. "You miss what I did for you." She flinched, like the words hit harder than she expected. "That's not fair. It's honest." She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Opened something, then handed it to me. A list of paused projects. Declined payments. A note from one of her investors demanding clarity before next week's pitch. "They're all freaking out," she whispered. "I'm not your fixer anymore." She nodded, eyes brimming. "So what happens now?" I stood up, walked to the desk, took out a printed copy of the spreadsheet I prepared, the one I hadn't shown her yet. Every expense I'd covered, every act of silent support. Labeled, dated, totaled. I handed it to her. She didn't speak as she read. Her eyes widened. Her mouth trembled. "You kept track of all this?" "No," I said. "I kept track of me. Because no one else was." Her tears finally fell. And I didn't comfort her. Not out of cruelty. But because I was finally learning what it felt like to let someone else sit with the consequences of their choices. "I need to think," she whispered. "I've already started." I didn't expect her to come back. Not so soon, anyway. The last time we spoke, if you could call it that, it ended with her holding the printed spreadsheet in her hands, silently crying while I sat by the window, arms crossed, not moving to console her. It wasn't out of coldness. I just didn't have anything left to give. That morning, I had planned to go on a long walk, maybe stop at the small cafe near the water and clear my head. I hadn't been sleeping much. Even though I wasn't at home anymore, her presence still followed me. Memories in my luggage, her voice in the back of my mind, guilt curled around my shoulders like a scarf I couldn't take off. But then the knock came. Soft, tentative. I knew before I opened the door who it was. She was dressed differently this time. No heels, no statement outfit. Just Isla, jeans, sneakers, and a sweatshirt that I vaguely remembered buying her one winter. Her hair was pulled up in a messy bun, no makeup on, and her eyes were red around the edges like she hadn't slept either. "Hi," she said. "I know I shouldn't be here. I didn't know where else to go." I said nothing, just stepped aside and let her in. She stood awkwardly for a moment by the small table, glancing around the modest hotel room like she'd never seen me live so simply. And maybe she hadn't. Our home had always been modern, curated, sharp. This room had none of that. Just a lamp with a loose bulb and a carpet that probably hadn't been replaced in 5 years. But it was peaceful, and it was mine. "For now. I thought you might still be mad," she said softly. I poured her a glass of water and handed it over. "I'm not mad," I replied. I'm just done pretending. She flinched slightly at that, sat down, cradling the glass like it gave her something to hold on to. I don't know how to say this without sounding selfish, she began. But I didn't realize how much I took you for granted until you were gone. I stayed quiet. She sighed. Everything's unraveling. Aspen, Bali, the board's losing confidence. I had to call off the lounge renovation. Jared keeps trying to spin things, but it's not working. I didn't make those decisions lightly, I said. I made them because I was tired of holding up a world that didn't leave room for me. Her voice cracked. I know. I tried to warn you, I added. I tried to bring it up so many times. Every time you brushed it aside. Like my support was some unspoken obligation. I know, she said again, quieter. And I was wrong. There was something heavy in her voice now. No sharp edges, no deflection. Just raw truth. It didn't make the hurt go away, but it gave it a place to settle. I thought I was building something for us, she whispered. But I was really building something with you holding all the bricks, and I never once asked if your hands were bleeding. That image stopped me for a moment. I sat across from her, folding my arms slowly. They were. But I kept going, because I believed in what you were doing. I know, she said, eyes brimming again. I know you did. And I twisted that belief into expectation. That you'd always be there. That I could just keep pulling. She wiped her face with her sleeve. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wanted you to know that I see it now. Everything. What I did. What I failed to do. I let her words hang in the room. And I realized I had a choice. Not the choice to take her back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But the choice to speak. Not as her partner, not as her provider, but as myself. Fully honestly. You didn't just leave me off a guest list, I said. You left me out of the story. Out of your narrative. You turned us into a performance. And backstage, I was folding props while you took every bow. She looked up at me, guilt thick in her eyes. I stood in that ballroom, I continued. Not because I needed the spotlight, but because I needed to remember who I was to you. And when I saw your face, when you looked at me like I was an interruption, I knew. She lowered her gaze. I didn't mean to treat you that way. But you did, I replied. And the truth is, if I hadn't pulled the funding, if I hadn't made it inconvenient, you wouldn't be sitting here. She didn't argue. And that, at least, was honest. I came because I wanted to say something to your face, she said after a moment. I'm sorry. For every time I made you feel invisible. For every moment I made you feel like an employee in your own marriage. The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. But still, I stayed still. Sorry, I said slowly, doesn't undo what happened. It doesn't put me back at the table. I know, she said. But maybe it opens the door. She stood then, slowly, and reached into her pocket. She pulled out the Mont Blanc box I'd left on her pillow. She didn't open it, just held it out. I didn't accept this gift the way I should have, she said. Because I didn't see what it really was. It wasn't just a watch. It was every year, every hour, every sacrifice. And I ignored it. I let others call you names in front of me. I let you stand outside the world you helped build. She placed the box on the nightstand and stepped back. I'm not asking for another chance right now, she said. But I hope, maybe, one day we can look at each other and not feel resentment. I stood too, met her eyes. That depends on what you build from here. And whether you remember who helped lay the foundation. She nodded. And for once, she didn't try to spin it, or soften it, or walk around it. She simply said, thank you, Reed, for everything, even what I didn't deserve. Then she walked to the door. But before she left, she turned around. I'll make it right, she said. And then she was gone. I stood in that hotel room, silent, for a long time after. The Mont Blanc sat beside me, unopened. The city hummed outside. But inside, something had finally shifted. Not everything was fixed, but the truth had finally been spoken. And sometimes, that's where healing begins. 2 days passed after Isla left the hotel room. She hadn't called again. No texts. No emails. Nothing from Jared either, which was a surprise considering how loud he'd been before. But silence has a strange way of revealing who's truly invested and who's just panicking. In their case, it was obvious. The only reason they called was because the money stopped. Not because they missed me, but because the machine I'd been oiling had started squeaking. And I didn't miss the machine. But I did find myself thinking about her, about everything we built, and how we never really sat down to balance the emotional books. So that morning, I opened the original spreadsheet. The one I had built over months, years even, to track every dollar I'd contributed to Isla's success. At first, it was just about keeping records, but now it felt different. Now it felt like something more, like proof. Not for her. For me. I added a final tab to the bottom, emotional cost. Not literal numbers, just a space to write what each expense actually represented. I wrote things like, February 2017, $2,500 for rebranding, sleepless nights, canceled plans, skipped anniversary dinner. July 2018, for $1,000 client acquisition trip to Montreal, missing my cousin's wedding. November 2019, $3,200 for the company's team-building retreat, swallowing resentment when I wasn't invited. Line after line, I mapped out the difference between support and sacrifice. It wasn't the money that hurt. It was the invisibility, the erasure. I closed the laptop. Then, something unexpected happened. My phone buzzed, not with a call from Isla, but with a news alert. Argento and Gray hit with sudden staff resignation, citing lack of transparency in leadership. My brow furrowed. I clicked through. Corbin, her lead designer, had resigned, and in his statement, he said, "Leadership without loyalty fails." We didn't know where the heart of the company was anymore. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I didn't reach out. I just read. And I listened to the silence that followed. Because for once, it wasn't mine to fill. But by afternoon, the storm found me anyway. I had just stepped out for coffee, my first real outing in days, when I saw her again. Not Isla. Marcy. Her assistant. She was standing outside the cafe like she'd been waiting for me. Dressed plainly, hair tied back, nervous eyes flicking around like she wasn't sure if I'd run or scream. "Reed," she said, walking up fast. "I swear, I'm not here to start anything. I need to talk to someone who understands what's going on." I didn't answer right away. "I quit," she said, breathless. "This morning." I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect that." "Neither did I," she admitted. "But things are imploding over there. Investors are backing out. The holiday campaign launch got shelved. Corbin leaving was a blow, but it's more than that. It's like..." Isla cracked. I didn't say anything. I sipped my coffee and let her keep talking. "She came into the office yesterday," Marcy went on, "and she wasn't yelling or blaming anyone like I expected. She just sat at her desk and stared at that framed photo of the team from 3 years ago. You were in it, you know? The retreat in Sonoma. I remembered that retreat. I'd paid for the house and cooked meals for everyone. They thanked me like I was the caterer. She kept saying, I let him become invisible." Marcy's voice softened. "I don't think she's okay." I let that sit for a while. And then, for the first time, I felt something that surprised me. Not satisfaction. Not justice. But sadness. Because for all the damage, all the cold moments and cut corners, part of me still remembered the version of Isla who used to cry from joy over small victories. The version who used to grab my hand under restaurant tables just to feel grounded. That woman had disappeared somewhere along the line. Swallowed by success, maybe. Or by the constant pressure to be more. And maybe I had disappeared too. In a different way. Letting myself become essential but invisible. Needed but never acknowledged. Marcy pulled a folded paper from her purse. "She asked me to give this to you. Said she didn't trust herself to say it right." I took the note. Not quickly. Not out of eagerness. But because I knew she wouldn't have written unless she meant it. After Marcy left, I sat on a bench, unwrapped the fold carefully, and began to read. "Reed, I didn't know how to talk to you anymore without sounding like I wanted something. And maybe that's the problem. I always assumed you'd give without asking, love without limits, serve without condition. I never stopped needing you, but I stopped showing you. And that's my failure. You were the one thing in my life I never questioned. I trusted you so deeply, I forgot to protect that trust. I built a world and locked you out of it, thinking I was proving my independence. But all I really proved was that I'd lost sight of the man who built the first bricks with me. I don't expect you to come back. I don't even know if I deserve to ask that. But I hope you find peace, even if it's without me. Isla, I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't perfect. It didn't fix anything, but it was real. That night, I didn't go back to the hotel. I didn't go to our old place either. I booked a new room. Somewhere further from the city, near the water, with no memory carved into its walls. And I sat at the edge of the dock, letter folded beside me, the Mont Blanc watch ticking steadily in my hand. I looked out at the horizon and realized that maybe this wasn't the ending. But it was a reckoning. And in some strange, quiet way, it was enough for now. The downfall didn't come as a storm. It came like a quiet shift in the air. Small things unraveling at the edges until there was no way to deny that the structure was failing. I didn't go back to the office. I didn't reply to Islah's letter, at least not right away. But I watched. And I listened. By the end of the week, it was in the news again. Argento and Gray postpones Q3 launch due to internal restructuring, they said, as though that word could hide the truth. But those who were close enough knew exactly what was happening. The people she depended on were gone, the investors uneasy, the once airtight confidence of the company now leaking through every open crack. Jared had gone radio silent. No surprise there. His loyalty was tied to outcomes, not people. Meanwhile, Isla, well, she was quiet too. Not her usual curated quiet, the kind that came with polished press releases and elegant photo shoots, but a real, raw silence. I didn't hear from her, but I heard about her. From Marcy. From one of her board advisors. Even from Corbin, who sent me a brief message on LinkedIn saying, should have seen it sooner. She was walking on your shoulders the whole time. That line stayed with me for days. Still, I didn't interfere. I wasn't out for revenge. I wasn't sitting somewhere plotting how to make her suffer. I had simply stopped holding up the weight of someone else's empire. And in my absence, the air had changed. A week later, I was walking through a small artisan market on the east side of town, picking up a few things for my new place, candles, loose-leaf tea, a handmade leather wallet, when I noticed a young woman standing at a pop-up booth. She was animated, engaged, showing a product demo to a group of curious onlookers. I wouldn't have stopped, except something about the logo on her banner caught my eye. I walked closer. Zier, natural home diffusers. Crafted by nature, engineered for peace, and then I recognized her. Zadie. She was the startup founder Isla had laughed about once at a dinner party, dismissing her as too grassroots to scale. I remember Isla saying, she's got spirit, but not much structure. Now, here she was, booth full, customers leaning in, energy humming like electricity around her. She looked up and noticed me. Reed Callahan, she asked. I nodded, half smiling. That's me. She walked over. I didn't think you'd actually follow up after that email. I said I would, I meant it. A few days earlier, I had taken a portion of the refunded Bora Bora money, the trip Isla never got to take, and invested it into Zadie's project. It wasn't a huge amount, just enough to help her secure her first warehouse space. I hadn't done it for any public reason. I did it because, unlike Isla's crowd, Zadie looked like someone who still knew how to say thank you. She grinned and held out her hand. You believed in me before the numbers looked pretty. That means a lot. I shook it. You earned it. We talked for 10 minutes about the business, her next steps, the grant application I offered to co-write with her. She didn't fawn, didn't flatter. She simply thanked me, again and again, with sincerity that couldn't be faked. And as I walked away, I realized something. I wasn't just finding peace away from Isla. I was finding purpose. Later that evening, as I sat in my small living room with one of Zadie's diffusers running, my phone buzzed again. Another article. Another fallout. Investor withdraws from Argento and Gray, citing internal discord and transparency issues. I exhaled deeply. Not out of joy. Not even out of vindication. But out of closure. That was the word that kept circling my head these days. Closure. Not revenge. Not punishment. Just the slow, deliberate process of separating what once was from what should never be again. And then, without warning, I got a message from Isla. Just a photo. No caption. No emoji. Just a single photo of the Mont Blanc watch I gave her, resting on her now empty desk. I stared at it for a moment. The desk used to be cluttered with client files, PR plans, branding decks. Now, only the watch remained. It didn't feel like a guilt trip. It felt like a symbol. Maybe even a surrender. Still, I didn't reply. Instead, I sat back and looked around my new space. No marble floors. No curated art on the walls. Just warmth. Honesty. The scent of cedarwood from the diffuser swirling in the air. And in that quiet moment, I realized I hadn't just withdrawn my money from her world. I had reclaimed my presence from a place where it was never properly held. And finally, I could breathe again. It had been almost 3 weeks since I saw Isla. 3 weeks since I pulled the financial cord that quietly powered her world. 3 weeks since she sat in my hotel room and cried for the empire she built. for the man she forgot, for the truth that finally surfaced. And in those 3 weeks, I didn't once reach out. I didn't need to. Some wounds don't heal because someone comes back. Some wounds heal because you stop reopening them for someone who never brought you peace in the first place. But I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. The anger had burned off. What remained was something colder, clearer, a sort of stillness I hadn't felt in years. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, quiet street, wood floors, nothing too flashy. Just enough. And I started doing something I hadn't done in a long time. Living. On my own terms. One morning, I got an email from Zadie. The subject line read, "You might want to watch this." Inside was a video clip, less than a minute long, from a local entrepreneurship panel hosted at the City Hall. Zadie had been invited to speak about grassroots funding and community-based investment. In the clip, she stood in front of a modest audience, confidently addressing the room with the kind of energy that Isla used to have before she traded gratitude for grandeur. And then Zadie said something that made me freeze. There was one person, just one, who believed in me when I was just selling prototypes in mason jars at street fairs. He didn't ask for shares or branding rights. He didn't demand a spotlight. He just said, "Let me help you grow." That kind of support doesn't just fund your business. It reminds you who you are. The room applauded. My chest tightened, not with pride exactly, but with something more tender. Something like being remembered. For once, I hadn't been the invisible partner. I'd been the difference maker. Not behind the curtain, not erased from the photo. Present. Visible. I shut my laptop and leaned back in the chair, letting that small moment settle inside me. And it was right then that my phone lit up with a text from Isla. "Isele, are you free to meet this evening?" I stared at the screen. It wasn't dramatic. No please. No guilt-laced paragraphs. Just a question. I waited 5 minutes. Then I typed back. "Where?" We met at a small restaurant in the Arts District. Not the kind of place she used to favor. No reservations, no valet, no curated plating. Just warm lighting, soft music, and wood tables with small candles. I arrived first. She came 10 minutes later, dressed in muted colors, no makeup, hair down and loose. She looked tired. Not worn down, but like someone who'd finally stopped running. "Thank you for coming," she said as she sat down. "I was curious," I replied. The waiter brought water. Neither of us looked at the menu. She folded her hands and stared at them for a long moment. "I'm not sure how to start." "Just start," I said. She exhaled. "The company is smaller now. We've cut staff. Returned investor funds. Jared left, resigned 2 weeks ago. And I didn't stop him. I didn't react. I just listened. I've spent a lot of time sitting with the damage. Not just the business fallout, but what I did to you. How blind I let myself become." She paused, blinking back the shine in her eyes. "I used to be so afraid of not being taken seriously," she continued. "Being a woman in this field, being underestimated, dismissed. It felt like I had to always be loud, always polished, always in control. And I thought needing you made me look weak. So I hid you." "That was your choice," I said quietly. "But it wasn't just hiding me. It was erasing me. And not just from the company, from your life." She nodded. "I know. And I'm sorry. I know sorry can't undo what I did. But I wanted to say it again. This time, without excuses." The table fell quiet for a few seconds. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a document. She slid it across to me. I opened it. Legal paperwork. Transfer of business shares. A formal record of repayment for all funds I had contributed over the last 7 years. "I had the board review everything," she said. "I added 10% on top, interest for time. You never asked for equity, but I'm giving it anyway. You earned more than this. But this is what I can start with." I looked at the document for a long moment. I wasn't sure what to say. "This isn't about fixing things between us," she added. "I don't expect you to come back. I don't even know if I deserve that. This is just me, taking responsibility." And then, she said something that caught me completely off guard. "I want you to know that I'm stepping down." My eyes lifted. "From Argento and Gray?" She nodded. "Effective next quarter." I realized I don't know who I am anymore. I've been leading on a hollow platform for too long. I'm taking a sabbatical. No press release. Just quietly stepping back. That silenced me, because in all my imaginings of what she might do next, that was never one of them. "I thought stepping away would be defeat," she said. "But I think it might be the first real choice I've made in years." The waiter came. We ordered 2 teas. For the rest of the hour, we didn't talk about the past. We talked about books, travel, how the sky seemed brighter lately. Simple things. Real things. And before she left, Isla stood at the table and said, "I hope you find happiness, Reed. Whether that path leads back to me or far away from me. I hope you feel free." I nodded slowly. And for the first time in a long time, I actually did. Free. That night, I didn't go home with answers. But I walked away with peace. And sometimes, that's more than enough. 2 months later, I stood on the platform at Kyoto Station, backpack over my shoulder, passport tucked neatly in the chest pocket of my jacket. It was early, just past 7 a.m., and the mist still clung to the rooftops like it was unsure whether to lift or stay. I breathed in the air, crisp and clean, tinged with the scent of cedar and distant street food warming up for the day. I hadn't planned this trip months in advance. It wasn't some bucket list destination I'd dreamed of since childhood. No, this trip was impulse. It was instinct. It was the exact opposite of everything my life had been for the last 7 years. And it felt right. I boarded the train without ceremony. No fanfare. No Instagram post. No matching suitcases or synchronized itineraries. Just me. And that, for once, was more than enough. As the train glided along the tracks, the city slowly gave way to small towns and countryside. Fields blurred by. Hills rose like old friends waiting quietly. I leaned my head against the glass, closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the urge to check emails, reply to anyone, or anticipate someone else's needs. I was just still, and that stillness was sacred. I thought about Isla, but not in the way I used to. She had sent one more message a few weeks ago. No questions, no requests, just a photo of her on a hiking trail somewhere in Oregon, standing next to a tree she'd captioned, "Learning how to slow down. One step at a time." I didn't reply, not because I was angry, but because I didn't need to. There are some journeys we must take separately, even if we once walked side by side. She was on hers. I was on mine. And that was okay. After arriving at my guest house, I spent the next few days doing something I hadn't done in years, choosing myself. I woke up without an alarm. I ate slowly, sometimes even skipping meals just because I wanted to wander instead. I visited shrines with no tour guides. I walked for hours with no destination. One morning, I sat beside a koi pond for nearly an hour, just watching the fish move. No meetings, no planning, no background noise except birdsong and wind. And the more time passed, the more I realized something. Healing doesn't always announce itself with fireworks or revelations. Sometimes it's quiet, like waking up and realizing your chest doesn't ache anymore, or walking past a couple on the street and not comparing their smiles to what you lost. It's sitting with yourself and not needing to explain why you left, or why you stayed too long. That's what closure looks like. Not a door slamming, but a door gently closing behind you, while you walk forward, not looking back. One evening, while walking through the historic district, I passed a small shop that sold handmade timepieces. Not luxury watches, not flashy status symbols, just wood, leather, and care. I stepped inside and struck up a conversation with the owner. A gray-haired man with soft eyes and hands that moved like he'd been building time instead of keeping it. He showed me a small piece, maplewood face, navy blue band, hand-carved with the words Ichigo, Ichi on the back. One moment, one meeting, he explained. It means every moment is once in a lifetime. Every person, every chance, never repeats. I bought it, not to replace the Mont Blanc I gave Isla, but to mark the moment I stopped waiting to be chosen, and chose myself instead. That night, I stood on a small bridge, the city lights reflected in the river below. Lanterns floated along the banks. Children laughed in the distance. I checked the time, not out of obligation, but because I could. The watch read 9 p.m., and for the first time in a long, long time, it didn't feel like I was running out of time. It felt like time had finally caught up with me and said, "You're right on schedule." I turned off my phone. No buzzes. No pings. No sudden knocks on hotel doors or emergency calls asking me to fix something I didn't break. Just silence. And peace. And then I smiled. Because I finally understood what all those missed calls, all those panicked emails, all those desperate messages were really about. They weren't about me. They were about losing the version of me that made everything easier for them. The silent builder. The giver. The man who never said no. But I wasn't that man anymore. And the best part? I didn't have to prove it to anyone. Not with cold revenge. Not with court documents. Not with rage. Just with absence. Because sometimes, disappearing is the loudest thing you can do. I spent the rest of the week exploring Kyoto like a man discovering life again. I journaled. I took pictures no one else would ever see. I smiled at strangers. I even helped a lost tourist find her train. And as I packed my things on the final day, I looked around at the small room. The folded linens, the single chair by the window, the bamboo mat in the corner, and I whispered a quiet thank you. To the stillness. To the silence. To the version of me that walked away without slamming the door. As I rolled my suitcase down the narrow street toward the station, I passed a small cafe. The kind Isla would have hated. No menu in English. No Wi-Fi. No brand presence. Just steam in the window and quiet music playing. I walked in, sat down, ordered something I couldn't pronounce. And as the steam rose from the cup, I leaned back in my chair, checked the time one last time, and smiled. Not because someone finally saw me, but because I finally saw myself.